Media and publishing, the first draft of what I put together, I was sort of focusing a little bit more on the technology side. What are the technologies out there, how they potentially come into play, and then it dawned on me that I'm actually really barking up the wrong tree. The real opportunity is something else, much, much bigger. And unless we think about that, we really miss the point when it comes to the evolving digital landscape and media and culture and storytelling. So, you know, I'm going to try and reference some of the Conde Nast brands because that's where I am, but essentially this, what we're going to look at impacts everybody who's a publisher. And by publisher, I mean whether you're a big environment, you know, you are a Time or a Hearst, you're an MTV Networks, or you are a blog network. It impacts everybody. We are essentially at our core, if we're in a publishing business, if we're in a media business, we are storytellers. That is what our bread and butter is. That is what keeps readers coming back time and time again, the storytelling. We tell stories about beauty, we tell stories about food, we tell stories about fashion, we tell stories about culture. So if we really want to look at the evolving digital landscape, what we really have to look at is, well, what is the story? If we don't know what a story is, then everything else and how we use these technologies and these platforms sort of is a moot point. So I thought it would be interesting to begin very quickly actually by looking at the anatomy of a story. And a story really, when I break it down, we realize from the beginning of literature, whether we're looking at Chaucer and Shakespeare to whether we're looking at modern movies, whether it's a great story you read in print, it's an amazing book, it's a trilogy of movies, it's Mad Men, whatever it is. Stories always have the same anatomy. And that anatomy, incidentally, is true of the best advertisements you see on TV and on video form as well. There is the who and the what. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, so ignore everything that doesn't make sense. This is what happens when Keynote and PowerPoint apparently don't speak well with one another. So there is the who and the what. There is the where, which is the setting, right? There is the how, which is the editorial perspective, which is essentially how we relate to it. This is, this is why we choose to read what we read in one magazine versus another, why we consume the same story on one site versus another, or why we buy one pair of jeans and its lifestyle versus another pair. This is how we relate to the story they're telling us. And the final thing is this sort of layer of complexity. Layer of complexity, all great stories have a layer of complexity to them, right? So, boy goes into a bar, meets a girl, and they live happily ever after. It's not really that good a story, is it? But if they go, they meet, and then they can't get together until 3/4 through the movie, and they have to fight the nemesis of one another and what have you. It becomes much more of an interesting story. All stories, the more layers of complexity there are to them, the more interesting they become. And so